Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rita, and I am the Program and Technology Specialist here for the Wood County Committee on Aging. I am really excited to have our special guest today, Mike McMaster, who is the Educational Coordinator for the Wood County Museum. So he is going to be doing a great talk today and tell us a little bit more about the history behind Wood County, and he'll tell you more. And then maybe tell us about how folks can visit the Wood County Museum now. So Mike, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you so much for being here with us.
All right, I will share screen. It'll take just a second. There we go. All right. My name is Mike McMaster. I work at the Wood County Museum. This afternoon, I am broadcasting, I suppose, from the meeting room at the museum. Hopefully it's not too echoey, but this is a program I gave many years ago, but is relevant to this week that we live in. The name of the program is The Night the Sky Fell, November 13th, 1833. And this event also happened, but to a somewhat lesser degree, in 1966, and maybe you remember that. And the stars shall fall from heaven. That is an excerpt from Matthew 24, verse 29. That is an end of days prophecy in the New Testament. Now let's start with these images. Living in 1833 was very difficult. Wood County, Ohio was still the Great Black Swamp. There were diseases, there were no cures. Medicine was in its infancy. Many people looked towards heaven and towards the end of days. During this time in the United States and in a very young Wood County was the Second Great Awakening. It began about 1790, ended about in the 1840s. This was a time of religious revivals across the United States. And we have talked about this in some of our other talks. At this time, if you were part of the Second Great Awakening, either in Wood County or elsewhere in the United States, you would be familiar with the book of Revelations and opening the sixth seal, Revelation 6, verse 13. This is the King James Version. I'll do the best I can. And the stars of heaven fell unto the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind. This is the prophecy of opening the sixth seal in the end of times. Now, there was one preacher in the United States. His preaching went from local to a national phenomenon. His name was William Miller. When he began to preach in September 1822, he stated that I believe that the second coming of Jesus Christ is near, even at the door, even within 21 years, on or before 1833. The followers of William Miller, and there were followers of William Miller right where I'm sitting now, back in the 1830s, Adam Phillips. The Wood County Museum sits on the Adam Phillips Park. And as we've talked, that is the doorbell. There we go. And as Charles Evers, the newspaper man, wrote, that Adam Phillips' smokehouse in his yard caught fire one night. Adam Phillips, who was a Millerite, believed that the day of judgment had occurred, and he wrote and he exclaimed to everyone in the cabin, "My God, Catherine, the judgment day is upon us, and my soul is unprepared. Call the boys." Now, Ellen White also was a young person believing in William Miller's prophecies. She visited Wood County in the 1850s. If you are a Seventh-day Adventist, her prophecy at Lovett's Grove, which we've talked to before, was very important. But in 1833, she said 2 years after William Miller began to preach, the whole firmament over all the United States, being then for hours in a fiery commotion. No celestial phenomenon has ever occurred in this country since its first settlement, which was viewed with so much dread and alarm. Now, what were these people talking about? What celestial phenomenon occurred for hours? It was the great Leonid meteor swarm that occurred on November 13th, 1833. Thousands of meteors an hour. Joseph Smith, the founder of the Mormon Church, was in Kirtland, Ohio in the fall of 1833. He prophesied on October 5th, wherein Joseph said, 40 days shall not pass and the stars shall fall from heaven. And lo and behold, on November 13th, these stars, there were falling stars. Frederick Douglas recounted, this was such a huge event in 1833 that many people, famous people of the day, which we will see, wrote about this. Frederick Douglass wrote in his memoir, his autobiography in 1881, many years after the event, that 1833 was also the year of that strange phenomenon when the heavens seemed about to part with their starry train. He was a slave at this time. I witnessed this gorgeous spectacle and was awestruck. The air seemed filled with bright descending messengers from the sky. It was about daybreak when I first saw this sublime scene. Harriet Tubman also, when she was 12 years old, in her biography, written many, many years later, witnessed this great falling star event. And many people, many of the slaves in the United States thought that this was a sign of things to come. Here is a wood carving from many years after 1833 showing both slave and slave owner looking at the falling stars. And one former slave was interviewed many years after this event in 1833, and she stated, but then the white folks started calling all the slaves together, and for no reason, they started telling some of the slaves who their mothers and fathers were, and who they'd been sold to and where they had gone. The old folks was glad to hear where their people went. They made sure we all knew what happened, you see. They thought it was Judgment Day, and people were confessing their sins. Abraham Lincoln in 1833 was about 24 years old. He was a boarder of a minister. The minister was awakened by the sight of falling stars and woke Abraham Lincoln, and he stated, "Arise, Abraham, the day of judgment has come." When asked many years after, when he was president, if the Union of the United States shall survive, Abraham Lincoln looked back on this day and said, just as he was awakened, he noticed that the constellations themselves, not the actual stars, were falling, and he knew that it was not the end of the end of days, and he said the Union would survive. All the way to Wood County. In her book, Reminiscence of a Wood County Pioneer, Martha Martindale, who was then age 12, wrote, "One night the hens were disturbed several times. Her mother had called myself and my brother to go to the door and drive the intruder off. The mother did not want to wake up in November, so she sent Martha Martindale and her brother. Brother opened the door, and as I looked, she said many years later, it looked very strangely. I said, the stars are falling, and that is how I witnessed it." She was writing this decades and decades after it happened. It was such an impactful moment. In Boston, these falling stars could be seen. They estimated at Boston the frequency of meteors was estimated to be about half that of flakes of snow in an average snowstorm. We have all seen snowstorms. We know how many thousands and thousands of snowflakes fall, thousands of falling stars. Here's a woodcut from that time period showing thousands of falling stars over Niagara. What were they seeing? That is the constellation Leo. That is the doorbell. Sorry about that. The comet known as Temple Tuttle, as it is known today, is a periodic comet with an orbit around the sun of about 33 years. When it was discovered in 1865, the meteors that came from the tail of this comet appeared to be falling out of the constellation Leo. In 1833, one estimate was over 100,000 meteors an hour were seen for hours and hours and hours. This must have been a great spectacle in 1833. I had just learned that in 1966, 40 meteors a second were falling. Perhaps you remember this. This meteor swarm also has a habit of coming very early in the morning. Here's my favorite woodcut. This is from a Seventh-day Adventist book from 1889, but showing a fraction of the falling stars. You can see people praying, people looking up in bewilderment, people on their knees. The mother is folding her hands. The children are shielding their eyes. This came from a woodcut by Joseph Harvey Wagner, who commissioned this book in 1889. He was a young man seeing this sign as the end of times for Seventh-day Adventists. That is the last slide I have. Like I said, the Leonid meteor shower this year, if I get my glasses on, will be on November 17th. On the night of November 16th and 17th, you will find a dark sky, and they say maybe 4 or 5 meteors will fall an hour, which is nothing compared to what it was a long time ago. This meteor swarm will occur about, the printed verse, about 4:30 in the morning and run to about 6:30 a.m. on the 17th. I'm going to stop sharing my slide now. There we go. Like I said, I just learned not too long ago that 40 meteors a second fell in 1966, although it probably fell very early in the morning, 2:30, 3:30, 4:30. So maybe many people did not get to see it even then. But 100,000 an hour would have been a spectacle to see. And now we can open it up for questions.
Mike,
Great.
is it always in November?
It's always in November. In 1833, it was November 12th and 13th in the morning. This year it is the 16th and 17th, with most of them, I believe, falling between 4:30 a.m. and 6:30 a.m. in pretty much, I think it's going to be a clear dark sky this year, but they estimate 4, 5, maybe 10 an hour, which is nothing compared to.
Right. Does anybody remember that? At least maybe not even seen it, but had heard that it was talked about in 1966.
No.
No?
No, what year was
Thank you,
that?
Six.
In
66.
November of 1966, 40 shooting stars a second fell,
No, I don't.
which is still just a fraction of the 100,000 an hour that were falling in 1833, but it still must have been a spectacle.
Yeah. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Mike?
Mike, do you have, in your research, did it say approximately how far away these meteors will be?
I do not think any reached the Earth. Temple Tuttle's tail is huge, astronomically large. It's the remnants of this burning up in the atmosphere. They weren't giant meteors, but more like what we call falling stars, things that burn up very brightly in the atmosphere. The people in 1833 did not have pole lights or street lights or house lights. Things were much darker, and they said they appeared to reach, yes, doorbell again, very close to the ground, but no one was killed. I doubt any actually reached the ground.
There are other meteor showers throughout the year, aren't there? That are minor compared to this.
Yeah, yes, there are. I do not know them all. It's very easy to find where and when they occur. This one this year, the night of the 16th, but more early in the morning. Very few people are up at 4:30, 5:30, 6:30, and we have so many lights and street lights, things are harder to see. But many people like Martha Martindale in what is downtown Bowling Green, her cabin, they were awakened by the light of these 100,000 an hour falling.
I couldn't imagine that.
Of course,
Unbelievable.
actually, Mike, the visibility would depend a lot on cloud cover.
In 1833, people who wrote about this remarked that it was, there's the doorbell, it was a remarkably clear and moon-free night. This meteor shower was visible from the Rocky Mountains to the Atlantic Ocean. The Native Americans in the 1830s out west saw this as a huge sign, and some of them recalculated their calendars and made treaties among their enemies. Like I said, the slaves, people wrote who were always looking for the second coming were also saw this as a sign as well.
Wow. All right, anybody else? Well, thank you, everybody. I really
Can I say
appreciate you
one thing
joining.
about-
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, in December, is it the 22nd that I go back on live? Or,
It could be. I don't have my list in front of me, but it will. All these folks, I think, are in our weekly email and probably receive our newsletter, so that will be featured in for your next talk.
all right, and the next talk will be a brand new talk that no one has ever heard before. Something just like this from the 187 years ago. This is even longer than 187 years ago. It is about the misorigin of history, about Presque Isle, two Presque Isles on the Maumee River in very early Wood County, neither of which are actually islands. So, and
Wow.
no one will ever have heard it before.
That's great. I'm very excited for it. So, Mike, if people want to visit the Wood County Museum, what about details regarding that?
Yes, we are open Monday through Friday, 10 to 4, and through November on the weekends from 1 to 4. If you remember how steep the county home stairs are, there are now 8 well-marked handicap spots behind the museum. You don't need a tag. You can park and take the elevator outside the building into the first and second floors. We have senior and veteran rates at $6. We have new exhibits on, especially interesting is people, places, and things. We have literally thousands of photos of Wood County from our time period, from 100 years before our time period on display. You will recognize some of the things, some will be quite new to you perhaps.
Wow. Thank you very much, Mike. We sure do appreciate you taking the time to do this with us every month. And we'll see you in December.
Thank
Yes.
you.
All righty. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Rita.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Bye.
Yeah.